Evening, gentlemen. Welcome to Man's Hour 13 on military service. I'm joined by a gentleman of power here, Iron Duke. How are you, sir? You're muted.
Yeah, I'm good, mate. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, I've been meaning to have you on for a while. We've had some great talks back and forth on your channel here, and this is a topic I wanted to discuss for a while here on military service because it really is something that is intrinsic to masculinity and manhood. It's almost something that is in almost something that's born into all boys from a very young age. How many guys grew up playing soldier or, just picking up a stick and sword fighting with one of their buddies or, playing cops and robbers, all this kind of stuff. It really is just a part of who you are as a man, your capacity for violence, so to speak. So I've been wanting to address this topic for some time. And, you being a veteran, I thought, you know what, this is a perfect guy to ask on.
Yeah, I mean, look, when I was a kid, I always wanted to be a soldier. So, from that point of view, I guess I grew up to do what I wanted to do. So, it ain't a good way to make a lot of money. Let's say it that way. But yeah, it used to be a manly thing to do for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we can just touch up on, at some point in this discussion is, how the military has changed and everything like that. But first, I wanted to get a baseline start about you and your service. Do you want to walk us through, where you started? Did you see action? What was it like? And all that good stuff.
I always try to duck myself, but yeah. No, I joined the British Army when I was 19 in 1983, just after the Falklands War. I'm a very old bastard now. So I joined the British Army in 1983, and fairly shortly afterwards was sent on a tour to Northern Ireland, where we were dealing with the provisional IRA. And then later on, luckily, as I was, I was sent on a enrollment tour to Northern Ireland, which was like a tour where the married dudes weren't able to take their wives and all this stuff. So I did two tours in Northern Ireland. I then got and this was in the British Army in the infantry. I was in the Queen's Regiment, and which was all that was left of my family regiment, and my father and grandfather and great grandfather had served in, which was the Middlesex Regiment, 57th Foot. Um, and then I got quite bored with being a peacetime soldier because it wasn't all that much fun. And I moved to South Africa, where I joined the South African Defence Force, and then got involved in the world's last colonial war in Southwest Africa, and did that for about another 7 years, until they were going to send our regiment. My regiment was actually mostly black soldiers, in the South African Army. And they were going to send us into townships, and I didn't really want to do that. And because I was on a contract, I resigned at that stage, and that was the end of my military service. And altogether, it was about 11 or so years, I guess.
Hmm. Yeah, very, very interesting. So, walk me through it. Right in the start here. So, everybody has the basic idea of the tough basic training right at the start, a very hyper masculine space where men are pushing themselves to be better. You're basically they're teaching you to be a warrior. And it's something that is extremely lacking in today's society and today's boys and today's men in general. Really, is that angry, almost I like to call it like Neanderthal energy. The to actually go out and fight basically. So walk us through that. What your basic training was like. Did you make like lifelong friends there? What did it really push you to your limit? Did it really enhance your feelings as a man?
Basic training was pretty easy, I thought. But then I was a blokey bloke, you know. And I'd always wanted to do this. You got to understand. Like I grew up with stories from my father and my grandfather about like my father served in Egypt in the early 1950s, and my grandfather went across on D+3 and had been in the army in India between the wars, and he saw action on the northwest frontier and stuff like this. So, like, I kind of grew up with all those stories. And the British Army, when I joined it in the early 1980s, was still very much like that. There was still enough of that traditional stuff around that, like, I liked it.
Hmm.
I didn't find it particularly hard. Like, I was 19-year-old, I was pretty fit. Yes, they pushed you for fitness, and they fucked you around quite a lot, and you had a lot of bull to do, like, polishing your boots and all this kind of stuff, and ironing your shirts the right way and making your bed the right way. But a lot of that is really teaching people self-discipline, which not everyone had. So yeah, there was that stuff, but I didn't find it hard at all, to be honest. But yeah, it was manly for sure. Um, and it was also very traditional in the British Army back then. Like the NCOs were like you would expect sergeants to be, that kind of stuff, and corporals.
Hmm. Yeah, very interesting. That always is like, one of the first stereotypes that the army gives you is that, it'll teach you discipline. It'll make a man out of you. It'll turn boys into men. It teaches you some of the fundamental, faculties, not just in physical strength, but also in your mental capacity, to be calm under pressure, to follow orders, to follow in line, to take life, all these intrinsically masculine qualities that can obviously save your life in a wartime situation, but also are extremely useful to you outside of that in the real world. I think there is something to be said for the fact that a lot of these disciplines, for lack of a better word, are just helpful to you in everyday life as a man, because as a man, quite frankly, the world just is out to get you in a way that it isn't for women. Women just, on average, the average woman is just going to have a far easier life than the average man is.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I mean, look, I even like stuff like close order drill. Like, a lot of people don't like parade ground drill stuff, but I kind of liked it because when you did it right, it was smart. Yeah. When everyone was in unison, and I didn't mind that stuff. But like I said, I grew up with that ethos. It was kind of like what I was taught from a little kid from the male members of my family. So, you know.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, very much so. I mean, it seems to be a very common theme that military service is very familial, very intergenerational. If your father served, your grandfather served, the probability of you serving seems to be much higher in my experience when I've talked to people. Personally, my family members, none of them served. At least back to my great grandfather was the last person. He served in Iwo Jima in World War II, but it's kind of like back then, most everybody did. But my most recent family members, none of them were in military service.
Well, Iwo Jima was bloody famous, very hard battle. So good on your grandfather for surviving that one. But yeah, yeah. I look. My family, like I said, all the male members of my family were British Army, going back into the 19th century. And my son is still serving the Royal Navy today. So, yeah. And the reason he's serving in the Royal Navy and not the British Army is because I put him off the British Army when he was a youngster because I could see that the crap that was going on in Iraq and Afghanistan was going nowhere. And I really didn't want him getting killed for no reason in Afghanistan.
Mm. This is a very interesting point you bring up because so many times when we see like political issues such as the forever wars and such like this, like the wars in the Middle East or what have you, it's always the veterans and soldiers that are ones that are most outspoken about the fact that these wars are largely useless and the politicians don't have it out for, the actual young men of their nations who are going out to fight in these wars. So I think that's very interesting that, you saw this even, 10, 15 years ago during, the Iraq war, that no, this is a problem, and, it's no use going to die in some politician's fake war.
Oh, listen, it gave me a hard time. It was like when my son was like early teens, like when he was 13, 14, 15, I spent quite a lot of time talking to him. And where I was lucky was that my late wife was from a Royal Navy family. Like her grandfather had been a chief petty officer in the Royal Navy. He served on an HMS Warspite during World War II, and which was a Royal Navy battleship. And yeah, it was a good job because I was able to guide him in that direction rather than the army. I just didn't want him to be killed in Afghanistan for no purpose because it was
Mm.
plain that everyone who was dying in Afghan, and like the British Army lost far less men than the Americans did in Iraq and Afghanistan, but we still lost, I think, something in the region of 600 or 700 guys dead and many thousands of wounded, which was the second highest after the USA. For absolutely nothing. I mean, look at Afghanistan today. It's run by the Taliban, just like it was before we arrived. So, what was the
Yeah.
purpose of that exactly?
Yeah, very much so. One of the big talking points that's going on in right online right circles these days is about the forever wars, and definitely in the United States over here, the recent numbers coming out that the United States, for the first time in living memory, is 25% under its army recruitment numbers. They just can't find guys, whether it's because of the physical conditions, because most Americans are overweight, or just simply because nobody wants to go and sign up for these wars. And there's plenty of reasons for that. Whether it's people realizing the forever wars are complete nonsense, and they, like the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, that were fought for basically nothing, and also what we're seeing now is the complete politicization of military forces. With injections of wokeism and diversity and transgender ideology and all this other bullshit. So it's very interesting that you caught up on this, way before anybody else did, and it makes sense because you're a military man. You could see you saw what was coming.
Look, uh, the as far as I understand about the American military, it mostly depends on kind of southern working class white men, as far as I'm working out.
Yeah, it's
That,
definitely
that,
the
that,
main. Yeah, it's
that,
definitely the
that,
main demographic.
that's kind of the backbone of the American Army and probably even the US Marine Corps. And why should these guys join an organization where straight white men are constantly denigrated, where they want fat black women and LGBTQ types? I mean, it's the complete opposite of what blokes who join the army for. Really, you know,
Mm,
it's just utter nonsense. I don't
yeah,
know. I don't know what to say about it except that it's obviously antithetical to everything that a military dude might want.
yeah, absolutely. A good example would be like, I don't know if you ever saw this video, but it was circulating around Twitter maybe a couple months back when all this army recruit numbers came out, and there was a bunch of army guys doing a drill, doing a run around one of the forts in the United States, and their drill instructor was a thin black woman, and she had such a like squeaking kind of voice, just screaming at them to do things, and I'm just looking at this thing and I'm thinking to myself, every one of these guys could just absolutely rip apart this woman with their bare hands, and they are expected to live this lie that she's going to be the drill instructor that's in charge of, ordering them around, and they're supposed to take orders from her. It's complete clown world to anyone who has like a pair of eyes and can actually see, what is really going on here.
Yeah, I totally agree. Look, the only woman in my unit, which was an infantry battalion, was a doctor. We had a woman doctor. She was the only woman in the unit, and I got no problem with that. But yeah, I've seen a number of videos and some written stuff from U.S. military people who have absolutely said that they don't like this ever increasing feminization of the army. I've spoken to Don DePlev, who is a friend of mine, who's an ex-United States Marine Corps dude, and he absolutely says, this is antithetical, it's anti everything that the U.S. Marine Corps stands for. On top of that, the LGBTQ XYZ nonsense, you've also got the fact that I think in America, particularly, a lot of people are worried that they could be used to oppress their own people if they join the military these days.
Mm.
Like standard right wing working and middle class community guys, and I think a lot of Americans are worried about that. I think a lot of Brits are too, but in particular in America, I think that's true.
Yeah, very much so. There is almost like it's like a dark cloud that's been on everyone's minds, especially the last 6 years or so in America, and especially after the tyranny of things like the coup lockdowns of the last 2 years, and the BLM riots and all these kinds of things, where much of the apparatus of the state was explicitly used to put down right wing organizations of any kind that were trying to either protect their communities or whatever it might be. And the military recruitment has generally always been from young white men and young right wing white men who are also Christian. And when you're deliberately using the apparatus of the state to put down these kinds of guys, yeah, it's definitely something that is worrying and concerning. And when you're seeing that the military is more actively recruiting people from more of like the left wing sphere of things, it definitely paints a pretty bleak picture for us. I don't know if you ever saw this. It was a couple of years back that there was a big scandal over here at West Point that one of the cadets just before graduation put a hammer and sickle flag under his cap at graduation and had writing on the hammer and sickle flag inside his cap that said,
Yeah,
"Come
I
on,
saw
Roland."
that. I saw
Yeah,
that.
yeah, and that was a big, scandal over here at the time, and that really is, a degree of foreshadowing for things to come. I mean, they got to get their guys from somewhere, and it's certainly not going to be, the southern, right wing guy.
Look, by and large, lefties don't join the military. It's as simple as
Hmm.
they just don't. So if you've got a globo homo government like senile Biden in America, or his controllers, or dimwit Truss in Britain and her controllers, um, right wing guys don't join the military. They just sorry, left wing guys don't join the military. They just don't. Um, you are naturally. I hate to say conservative these days because I'm not conservative. I'm a reactionary traditionalist. Is how I describe myself these days. But I'm not a conservative because most conservatives are cucks.
Yeah.
But if you're right of center, those are the people who join the military traditionally. Those are the people who fight your wars. Those are the people who die. And as far as I can work out at the moment, the globalists don't want to recruit those people. But what that's going to result in the end is we're going to lose wars. Simple as that. Like
Mm.
a load of women and LGBTQ types and fat black African women are not going to win a war.
Yeah, most certainly. And, I guess the United States solution to this problem, which has more or less been our solution for the last, 60 years of warfare, basically, is just pay our way out of it in the sense of we're just going to shock and awe, bomb things into submission with, drones or, strafing runs from planes or whatever it may be. And, the simple fact of the matter is that in order to, win wars, you need to hold ground and control territory, and that requires actual foot soldiers on the ground to deal with things. And if you're not going to have switched on masculine men who are willing to fight and die for you, you're going to have some problems.
Well, yeah, look, I'll come back to Don the Pleb again. Don the Pleb had actually a quite complicated job in the US Marine Corps artillery, like that you couldn't do if you were a thicko. But Don is the first person to say, like, if you don't have those dudes who can actually occupy ground, man roadblocks, occupy the hill over there, force the enemy out of this building or whatever, that kind of infantry stuff, which you are always going to have to do. Drones are never going to replace infantry soldiers. They can't. He would be the first dude to say, look, you've got to have infantry dudes who can do that. And, if you're going to get guys to do that, and they always take the most casualties out of any arm in the military, the infantry always takes the most casualties. They take far more than the armor guys in the tanks. They take far more than the artillery. They certainly take far more than the Air Force or even the Navy guys do. If you haven't got those basic blokes to go and do that stuff with very high casualties, and why should they do it if they don't believe in their cause? And today, what cause are we supposed to believe in if we're in a Western army?
Yeah. I mean, our leaders, number one, are decrepit, old, just completely lifeless people that don't inspire, great followership or anything like that. I mean, here in the States, we definitely had that, to some extent with Donald Trump. But I was actually talking to our friend Charlemagne about this recently. That thinking back into American history, when was the last time we really had like a lion president over here? And we had glimpses of it with Donald Trump. We had a little bit of it with Bush Jr. right after 9/11. Bush Sr. was a CIA guy, so he didn't really strike that much for me. We had a little bit of it with Reagan with his early Soviet talk, but really, I went back as far as Teddy Roosevelt, and that was in 1898 is when he got elected. Well, he didn't get elected. McKinley was shot, and then he became president. But when he was the last guy who really was a true, lion president for us. I mean, the guy was a cavalryman. He was a rough rider. He was a professional big game hunter. He was a boxing champion. He was like the last guy that I really think the Americans had that was like, a true masculine president that could inspire people to actually, fight and actually had a warrior spirit. And I just see all the way across the Western world, like who's going to go and fight for, Liz Truss or, Emmanuel Macron or all these, complete, wet loser, just weak people, for lack of a better word. And say what you will about Vladimir Putin, at least the guy, looks like he could take a punch, so there must be something to be said for that.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I always say the last Conservative Prime Minister in Britain was Lord Salisbury. He was around at the same time as Teddy Roosevelt. So, yeah, I think that's pretty true. I mean, like, I've heard Americans say that Roosevelt was liberal, but on the other hand, you're correct, Red Hawk, he was a manly man. And he did lead the Rough Riders in the Spanish-American War. And like, I don't give a shit about the politics of the Spanish-American War, but the guys flying in it, they were just trying to do their best, which is what the military always does. People confuse the politics of war with people actually fighting. Like, much as I detested the war that was going on in Afghanistan and Iraq, the guys flying it, I have nothing but admiration for, because it was not their war. They were just sent there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it, just the warrior spirit. There really is just something intrinsically, respectful that men can give to each other. And I brought this up before with Semigog. Actually, we've talked about this a couple times before. That um, you know, women are often like the first ones. They'll actually like start a fight if you're in a bar or something like that. They'll get up in somebody's personal space. They'll cause a problem or something like this because
Yes.
yeah, and then expect the men to step in to fight for them and stuff like this. But when you're in a group of guys, it's almost like there's an unspoken rule in the room that at any point somebody can get choked in this conflict. There's that capacity for violence that is always in the room, and just when some other guy steps up and stands up and gets in your face and something like that, things don't guys know that things could escalate very, very quickly, and so they're much less frequent to actually come to violence. And when it does, people know it's going to go down. But I always think that's very interesting that of course you should always respect the warrior spirit and stuff like that, like guys that can actually fight, and stuff like that, like just definitely command the presence of a room unlike anybody else. Like just a regular, soldier in the army who's switched on and is a tough masculine man. I just feel like he's going to command more presence of a room than, some hedge fund manager who might have, 10 times his wealth or something like that. There's really is something that comes from us from like our caveman days that just speaks to our DNA. It's like, oh, there's the strong man in the room. Got to listen to what he says.
Yeah. Look, I'll tell you a story. 20 years ago, this was. So, like, I was, oh, crikey, I was in my late 30s, let's say. Um, and I went to a nightclub with my girlfriend in Northern Australia. And at that time, the Australian Air Force were getting F-14s. I think it was F-14s. Yeah. And there were a load of American Air Force dudes who were teaching them. Yeah. And so we were in this nightclub, and my girlfriend wanted to dance, and I didn't. And she said, "Can I go and dance? And will you mind?" And I said, "Yeah, all right." So anyway, she went and danced, and then I looked up a few minutes later, and there's some wank with his hand all over her ass. So I walked up to these guys and said, "Look, this is my woman. Leave her alone." And it turned out that she was dancing with six American Air Force fighter pilots who were teaching the Australian Air Force how to fly F-14s. Now, don't get me wrong, I would have lost in a fight with six blokes. But I think they realized there would have been casualties on their part. And so it all ended peacefully, except for my girlfriend nagging that I was somehow not letting her be a free woman. So, but on the other hand, also looking at me and going, "Oh, he wasn't scared," that thing that women do all
Mm,
the time. So yeah, absolutely, mate, absolutely. And
yeah.
and the American Air Force guys, to give them their due, didn't realize that this was a chick with a bloke sitting watching her. So yeah.
Mm, yeah, capacity for violence is very attractive to women. It's just something that's born into their DNA that they look for. Some kind of protection and provisioning. So that's why they like guys with big muscles. So you should always be physically fit. um, you know, uh, uh,
I don't have big muscles, but I'm 6'2" and 200 pounds, and like I always have been since I was like 19. So
there you go.
but
Mhm.
yeah, but yeah, yeah, absolutely. Women want to feel protected. They do, and all this simpy beta nonsense that you see is like it is just nonsense. It never works.
Mhm.
Women despise men like that.
Yeah,
They just, even
yep.
if they claim to be feminists, they despise men like that.
Oh, absolutely. Women hate weak men so much that they will go into crippling levels of debt and take soul crushing jobs and put off having children just to avoid being with one. It's 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 hard to like overstate how much they despise weak simping behavior from men.
Yeah, but I mean, in the modern world, the other thing we face as like blokes is like I will tell stories from things I did when I was like a teenager or in my 20s or at any time when I was single, and I'll get quite young men, like 20, 19, turning around and saying to me, "Oh, you're absolutely degenerate." And I don't know where that comes from. I just don't, because like I was never degenerate. Oh, okay, I probably was always degenerate, but um, I was never not male. You know what I mean?
Mm,
And the stuff I did was pretty much what my dad or my granddad would have done.
mm.
These guys, they seem to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and they think you should be like a virgin when you get married, and like it's just unrealistic.
Yeah, I very much agree with this, especially for men. It's you know, it, masculinity isn't like a switch you can just like turn on and off, or a buffet that you can, take parts of it that you'd like on a certain day, or whatever. It's the same kind of energy that gets men to protect women is the same kind of energy that gets guys to go rob a convenience store if he isn't socialized properly. Like you can't just switch it on and off. It just is what it is. Now Vinland actually brings up a pretty good point in chat. We were going to discuss this anyway. Was do you think people should still join the military today? Now, from where I'm sitting, I've never served anything like that, and this will be a good discussion we can have back and forth because I know you have a differing opinion on this one. But from where I'm sitting, as let's say like you're a working class guy, maybe you come from like a single parent home or something like that, and the army must seem pretty enticing for you because it's a masculine space where you can meet other men. You have the GI Bill, so they can pay for your schooling. You can get a good education. You have healthcare paid for yourself for the rest of your life, and you get free lodging and food for at least 4 years and such like that. So it's got to be a very enticing offer, especially for a young working class guy. So me on the outside looking in, despite all the wokeism and all this kind of stuff, you know, it's tough to beat that. Just as a guy starting out, I mean, what are you going to do? Go to college and go 100 grand into debt? So, what do you think about that?
First of all, I want to say Kingdom of Finland, and the chat was entirely correct. There were FA Hornets. That was what the Americans were teaching the Aussies to fly. I'm sorry, I'm no Air Force expert, even though my son is in the Fleet Air Arm, which is the aircraft bit of the Royal Navy. But yeah, I look. To be honest, today I wouldn't advise a young man to join the military because if you join senile Biden or dimwit Truss's military today, what exactly are you going to be fighting to defend? Is it something you really like? Because I doubt it, to be honest.
Mm, yeah, yeah, very much so. I mean, it's definitely a far cry from even, let's say, even like the colonial days, where you're fighting for conquest or for fighting for families of settlers on the frontier or something like that, or and despite our own grievances with the world wars and the politics involved or something like that, you know you actually were fighting for, especially you Brits, or we're fighting for a genuine threat to your homeland back home.
I get fed up with Nazi laughers who pretend that the blokes who landed on D-Day in 1944, whether they be British, Canadian, or American, were somehow like Globo Homo gay American empire. Because of course they weren't. They
Hmm.
weren't at all. They were not like that at all. And to say they were is a lie.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
the the politi-
Every one of
the
those men would be labeled far right today,
yeah,
if they were in American
they'd all be
politics.
called far right racists today. Every single one of whereas it's the political stuff you're looking at, not the actual men themselves.
Right.
So yeah, I get niggled with that shit because it was never true. But
Mhm.
on the other hand, today, could I advise? Look, my son wants to stay in the Royal Navy because he wants to command a squadron and eventually his own warship. But I've told him twice now that maybe you shouldn't be doing that, mate. Like, I'm not going to tell him not to, and even if I did, he'd say, fuck off, Dad, you know? He's a man himself. But I can't advise people to do it. The only thing I would say it does is it gives you some skills, it gives you some good mates. Joining the military gives you some good skills which will stay with you in later life. It'll give you some good mates who will stay with you in later life. But to actually go and fight for Globo Homo, which is if you join the American or British, Canadian or Australian armies, that's what you're going to end up doing. Would I advise people to go and do that? I don't think so, really, to be honest, at the
Mm.
moment. I mean, I hope that will change, but at the
Mm.
moment,
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I feel like Americans are a little more lucky in this regard. Number one, because firearm ownership is so common and so easily accessible over here, and then also, our country is so big. There's enough places left where we do have those hyper masculine spaces, and you can get a lot of the skills and the training that the military would give you. You can just get that in a to some extent in a civilian capacity. I'm not as familiar with, other places, throughout Europe and the Commonwealth about, firearm ownership and those kinds of training here. But, as far as it relates to in America, there's guys walking around with, fully automatic M16s that are just in their basement, gun safes. And you can go to a local gun range and a gun club with a bunch of guys and work out in a local militia and all this kind of stuff.
yeah, look, certainly if you're in the UK, you're going to learn more about firearms in the military than you are anywhere else. But I would just say this, that don't compare civilian gun ownership, even in America, with what you learn in the US Marine Corps or the US Army.
Mm,
Um, Certainly in the US Marine Corps. That's going to teach you better than anything you're going to. Like, if we're ever in a situation where everything goes to shit, and you, Red Hawk, for example, have got a US Marine Corps NCO or somebody, he's going to know more about firearms than you, no matter how much civilian shooting you've done.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's a very popular I guess you would almost call it like a career path for ex-military guys. It's such a large over index of guys when they leave the military, they come back home and they start a gun range or a firearms club or many guys who run like a NRA range clubs or shooting classes and stuff like that. They're all ex-military guys, so we are lucky, but absolutely. I mean, you could have more access to, more of the top training, in the Marine Corps or the Navy SEALs or the Army. You definitely will get a better taste of it in a military training scenario than you will as an average civilian. Absolutely true.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's as like all military guys say, it's not your firearm, providing it's clean and doesn't jam. It's the training of the dude behind it, you know.
Mm,
That's gonna win in the end. Like the British SAA is a crappy, really crappy assault rifle, but the blokes who can use it really well will beat civilians with a M16 anytime you like.
mm,
Um,
yeah.
Even though ergonomically it's crap and all the rest of it, and like every part of the British military that can ditch it has, um, and increasingly they have ditched it. Yeah, I mean the American military has recently gone to a new caliber for its infantry, and also I think for the U.S. Marine Corps. Um, which can go through like the armor plates that people wear these days.
Hmm.
So
And
these things change.
yeah, very much so. Interesting. I have to look into that a little bit more. I'd be curious to see what they changed too. But one other topic I wanted to discuss here, and I got a family friend who saw action in the first Gulf War. He was an American serving out there, and I g- a couple years back we were having dinner, and the discussion of PTSD came up, and he is really a hard badass kind of guy, and he basically went on this rant, basically saying that it's largely completely fake and not real, and basically a weak man if you can't stomach what you had to do when you went over there in a war scenario. What do you have to say about that? What do you think about all this stories about PTSD and post-traumatic stress, and all the psychologizing of men's psyche and such? What do you think?
I think it's hugely exaggerated. Did we have like millions of these people after World War II? I don't remember that myself.
Mm,
I just think it's hugely exaggerated. I think it's used as a way of attacking men. Um, most men can deal with violence. Have I seen stuff that made me almost throw up? Yes. Um, have I seen stuff that I still get bad dreams about occasionally? Yes. Does that make me insane? No. I'm just a bloke, you know. I think blokes can deal with this stuff. Um, yeah, does it affect some people? Absolutely. I'm sure it affects like a very small minority of people badly, and those people need to get help and need to be able to get help. But I don't think it affects most men in that way at all. I think like as a bloke you deal with it really.
mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's definitely, it's just something that's always coming out more and more in rhetoric, especially over here in the United States, because whenever it gets around election time, you know, the discussion of veterans and veterans affairs and everything always comes up. Like, who's going to do something for the vets? The VA is running out of funding. The healthcare for the veterans is terrible. 1 in 4 veterans commit suicide. There's a vet that commits suicide, once a week or whatever the number is, or something like that. We have to help these guys. We have to help these guys. And Dr. Prepper brings up a good point in the chat here. Do you think this is a way to portray our toughest men as weak? Is this some kind of psychological trickery or warfare going on from the elites? What do you think about that?
Look, I think there's two different things here. I think on the one hand, if you're going to say that veterans don't get enough help, then absolutely I would agree with that. Like, why are there so many homeless veterans in the USA and in Britain? Living on the streets, you see homeless veterans when there are endless immigrants from the third world being brought into the countries.
Hmm.
So on the one hand, there is that, and yes, veterans should get help when they need it. I mean, if they put their life on the line for you, the country should help them, and that doesn't always happen at all. But I think the PTSD fixation is a way of attacking men, really, because most men can deal with that. Not all. There are going to be veterans who do have problems with that because we're all different. But the vast majority of men can deal with that shit, and you know,
Hmm.
men are designed to deal with shit.
Yeah.
That's what we do,
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just from a biological perspective, men are built for combat. Like we have broader shoulders for a reason. The bones in our face are much wider and stronger than a woman's, so we can take a punch. We have stronger ribs and all these kinds of things. Our muscle mass, everything. Men are designed for combat, for sports, for getting into the thick of it. It's how we became the apex predator on the planet. And if these guys don't have these, proper vets, I guess you could say, of getting out these natural inclinations through something like the military, because it is not politically advantageous for us to go and join it, or just simply because, quite frankly, who wants to die in a forever war for nothing? What do you think guys can do to project this masculine energy in a healthy way? Because it seems like everywhere in society, we're telling men to man down. We're telling them to be weak. We're telling them to be more like women. We're telling them to emote more. And then on the other extreme end of things, we have an extreme rise in violent crime here in the United States because men aren't being, socialized properly to, channel this energy in productive ways. So if we don't have the military, as we've discussed, as a viable option for these guys, what do you think we could be doing, in our communities or in our groups or as nations? What do you think we can do to help guys to, develop these skills that are crucial for life?
That's a difficult one, to be honest, in the modern world. I think, as everyone says on the dissident right these days, you've got to do local stuff. In your local area, you're gonna have ex-military dudes, hopefully, and maybe you can do some stuff with those guys. So I hesitate to say very much on YouTube because it's not a free speech channel, as you very well know, Red Hawk. Um,
Yeah.
so I look, I find it hard to say much about this, to be honest with you, in public. I would say, look, there's going to be local people who are ex-military, and maybe especially in America, but also in UK, who are maybe ex-military and combat veterans. Um, get involved with those guys, I guess. Um, and let's hope that governments change. I mean, look, we've got to clear these people out. You know, I hate. Yeah, okay, it comes from AI, I guess, but it doesn't really. It comes from Jonathan Bowden, who was the great British nationalist. We've got to clear these people out and get back to where our militaries were actually defending our own people.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, like I mentioned earlier, that it would be easier for guys in America, because we still do have a lot of these masculine groups left. I mean, they are actively trying to get rid of them and subvert them, and call everyone toxically masculine for participating in these things. But I think it's absolutely essential that you find a group of guys that you can hold to account, and then also equally as much they can hold you accountable to when you're screwing up. You can go and share your issues that you're having with them, and all these good things. I mean, just start in the gym. Start with any other local activity, some local masculine activity that you can get involved with each other, and just do that together. You know.
Yeah, look, I give you an example, Red. When I was in South Africa in the SADF, in the South African Defence Force, I had a mate who was ex-US Marine Corps, and years later, I can't remember now, it was probably 9, 10 years later, he was living in the Caribbean with this French guy who was like 15 years his junior. And I was running a yachting tour around the British Virgin Islands. And it turned out, because I booked it wrongly, it was my fault. We didn't have enough cabins for the number of tourists on the holiday. So I got hold of this guy on the telephone, and this was the day before Christmas Eve. And I said, "Look, mate, I'm really fucked. Can you bring your catamaran over here?" Because he had a quite big, a 38-foot camera. And I said, "Can you bring it over here? And like, I'll give you X amount of money." And he said, "Yeah, all right then." So he leaves this really cute little French girl who was like 15 years younger than him, and comes across on Christmas Eve to come and save my bacon. that's the kind of shit you get in the military, you know.
Mm.
So yeah, and he always said, "I always liked you because you were the only limey who was black enough to be interesting," and he meant black enough in like evil, you know. But
Mm.
yeah,
uh,
yeah,
for
um,
for sure, like male bonds and male friendship like that are just absolutely essential as a guy, and unique to the male experience as well. I don't know if you watched my Man's Hour episode I did with Not Me Not You. We went over male friendships, and we discussed this at length that the bond between men, like an actual friendship like that, is simply just stronger than what any woman is ever going to have with her girlfriends. It's just a simple fact of the matter. Like just the unspoken bond of like, and I've mentioned this before that I've got some friends I know in my life that I would absolutely not hesitate to do absolutely anything for. They come knocking on my door at 3 o'clock in the morning with a blood bag and a shovel. I'm like, okay, where are we going? Like there's absolutely nothing that would, get me to betray these guys up into the gates of hell itself, and it's something that I see as surely lacking in a lot of the younger guys, especially the ones that are growing up in the ever increasing atomized and online world that we're living in. So I think it's a major goal for me for as much as possible to get guys to meet up in real life, to have purely masculine spaces. Do not let women be involved in your spaces. They immediately just screw up the dynamic. And it's not to hate on women, it's just the simple fact of the matter. Like guys need to have male exclusive and male only spaces. And quite frankly, that's what the military used to be for a very long period of time. And now, when you have women involved in the equation, everyone is just getting a one up on each other to try and get in the girl's pants. It's just a simple fact of the matter.
yeah, I'll introduce a woman into a group of men, and that's exactly what happens. You know, everyone wants to see who can get into a niggas, but yeah, male friendships are a big deal, and certainly in the military, it used to be a big deal. I think it still is up to a point. Um, but it's the powers that be, like the so-called political elites, are trying to destroy it. And in doing so, they're going to destroy their own militaries, which will mean the next big war we fight will lose.
Mm, yeah,
It's really that simple. We will lose the next big war we fight if they destroy that. Because when you're fighting the enemy, you're not fighting even for the people back home most of the time. You're fighting for the bloke next to you, really.
mm, yeah. It's a common tale I hear told by everyone I talk to that saw action overseas or has served. It's like when you're really down to the thick of it, you're not thinking about the politics of your nation or what you're fighting for, stuff like that. You're fighting for the guy next to you, so that he gets to go home, so that he gets to live at the end of the day. And it truly is an extremely bonding experience that
He's your mate. He's your mate. That's who you're fighting for, is your mates.
mm, yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Really, it comes down to that. And the, the, the so-called political elites in the West, like senile Biden, dimwit Truss, and all these other people, like, loves old ladies, Macron in France, and all this kind of stuff. They don't get it at all. They just don't.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. And just all across the Western world right now, I mean, a good talking point in right wing circles right now is waiting for Caesar. That some Julius Caesar type character with a military background is just going to come in and clear out all of these weak gamma and beta men that are now ruling over all of our societies, or women in some cases, like Liz Truss that you've pointed out here. And I really do think that we saw a glimpse of this with Trump, and like I do. I would not be surprised if something like that were to come about at some point in the future. I do really think, especially men, are really, really thirsting for this stuff, especially over here. I've been talking about this on Twitter recently that the energy from men in general over here in America has completely done a 180 since Trump left office and now Biden is in charge of things. The energy over here just feels dead. It feels, like we're on the precipice of something. It just feels like, nothing is happening. If people are people are fed up with it. People are looking for, a strong man, a strong leader to come in and, basically tell all these people to fuck off, for lack of a better word. And I really do think a large portion of people would totally sign up for it at this point. Everyone just sees the complete lunacy of what's going on here. And we're expected to believe that this, 79-year-old, senile old man who, probably, shits his pants every fucking day is supposed to be in charge of things. It's just absolutely ridiculous.
When he's not sniffing little girls,
Oh yeah, yeah,
for their money, yeah. Look, Chris Gard is in the chat, and
yeah. I see that.
Chris Gard is an excellent Australian singer and musician, and he says technological warfare destroyed the traditional warfare comradeship. Do you know what? Technological warfare is much overrated in the West, and especially by the mainstream media. Like, there's still a lot of warfare which is just like blokes doing bloke stuff on the ground.
Mm.
I've spoken at length with this on this with like Don the Pleb, for example. And I like Chris Scott, by the way. Do go and subscribe to his excellent channel.
Yeah,
Um,
he did the theme song for Man's Hour. He's a great guy.
yeah, no, he's excellent. He really is. Apparently, people tell me he's a bit crazy, but if you're not a bit crazy these days, you're not going to survive.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of this technological warfare stuff is like hugely exaggerated by the MSM. And a lot of it is still blokes on the ground for rifle. Sorry, just is. It's sometimes even still blokes on the ground for rifle with fucking bayonet. This is why women make piss poor soldiers.
Mm.
They're not strong enough to carry the loads. Like an average infantry dude has to be able to carry 60 to 80 pounds. Can't do that. You can't do the job. Most women can't do that job. Um,
Mm.
Plus, you have to be able to run, jump, fall down ditches, and all that stuff. And many women will break bones doing that stuff. Can't do the job again. And then at the end of it, you have to actually kill the enemy. And many women lack that killer instinct to be able to do that. Can't do the job again.
Yeah.
Um, Women and men are not interchangeable. We're not the same.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
I mean, you Riddle, you all know this, like because this is like absolutely in your lane. Every single woman who's ever in a relationship where there's any violence is going to be the victim of that male violence.
Mm. Yeah.
Like, no matter how wimpy and tiny the bloke is, she is going to be the victim, and that is even written into law, isn't
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. In
it?
most cases, domestic violence just does not apply to men in many
Yeah,
laws. It just doesn't exist. I've mentioned this before on multiple previous streams as well. Is that you know, it's becoming a severe problem, not just in military purposes of dumbing down requirements for the job and everything, so women can get involved, but it's also becoming a problem just in civilian society where women are seeing a lot of these like female-led action movies and stuff like this, where it's just completely absurd. That a 110-pound girl is just throwing around 180-pound jacked guys with like one kick to the throat or something like this. And I remember this happened. It was like sometime last year, earlier last year. One of my girls at the time was trying to fight me on this, and I just stood up and I asked her, "Okay, try and move me." And she came over to me, and she's like 45 pounds lighter than me, and she just tried her best to actually move me. And then I told her to punch me once in the chest. I was like, "Yeah, this is not nonsensical. This is absolutely ridiculous. Like it's not going to work." So,
yeah. Look, I've had women punching me and slapping me around the face, and I just laughed at them. But yeah, that's what you do as a boy. But Yeah, there's a great movie with Lee Marvin. I used to like Lee Marvin. He was such a good actor. Can't remember what's that movie where he's trying to get revenge on this dude, and he's with Dickinson, and there's a great scene where Angie Dickinson is hitting him and slapping him and all this, and he just stands there and lets her do all this crap. That's what blokes do.
Hmm.
Really. Women are pathetic in terms of physical stuff, and they always will be. And it doesn't make any difference what Hollywood tries to pretend. But if you're going to have the law which says that any woman is always the victim of domestic violence, no matter how wimpy her male partner might be, how are they ever going to be soldiers?
Yeah, very
It,
much
it,
so.
it's like complete nonsense. You can't have it both ways. Although, of course, feminism always wants it both ways. You know, they want women to be pathetic victims, but also like strong, independent women. And you can't have it both ways. It's not possible.
Yeah, no, absolutely true. It also is becoming a big problem with I mean, I mentioned girls getting in fights in bars like that earlier, but I'm seeing a lot more of these videos now of women signing up for self defense courses, and you'll see like a couple of these clips online where they go to these courses and they're basically just I like to call it like the hammer fist. They always like telegraph their moves, and they always like, when they try and strike people, it's never like a straight out punch like you do in like a boxing match or something, or a kick to your legs or something like that. It's always like they wind up their punch, from like 12 o'clock on a clock and then down to 6, and they just like flail their arms around wildly and everything like that. And the female coach is always just like cheering them on, like, yeah, you go get them and stuff like that. And quite frankly, if you're in like a serious situation like that with a guy who is within, close quarters range like that with you, the only thing that's going to succeed in doing is succeed in you pissing him off, and he's actually going to do way more damage to you. There's no way you're going to kick off a guy who's 60, 80, 100 pounds heavier than you, who's got half a foot or even a foot taller than you. It's just completely nonsensical. If you're going to get into some self-defense as a woman, just pick up a gun. Honestly.
Yeah, yeah. I'm 57 years old, and I guarantee you, I could beat up if I was an asshole, which I'm not. I could beat up 99% of women and terrify 100% of them. And I'm 57. I'm not a young guy, but if I was an asshole, but I hasten to add, I'm not. So women have just got ideas beyond their station these days. That's just the truth.
Yeah.
Their ideas beyond their station. They can't do that stuff.
Mm, yeah, for sure. Well, man, it's been a great conversation, about service and everything like that. One of the last things I want to ask you about is the actual act of being in a combat zone, being in a a wild and crazy situation, seeing like a actual death, which is completely removed from modern day society and everything like that. What do you have to say about that? There's a lot of guys in our circles that are online and are kind of ready for like bring on the civil war kind of deal. We need to clear these guys out. What do you have to say about that? I mean, obviously in some circumstances you do have to defend people, and violence is necessary in many circumstances, but you know uh, there's a part of me that sees it. I don't know if you should necessarily bask in the glory of violence like that. I mean, wars are bloody. I don't know if anyone should ever be really cheering on for these kinds of things. What do you have to say about that?
Okay. Look, I shot some people. The only one that I still get nightmares about is I saw this Swapo dude, Southwest African People's Organization, which is basically commies. They were being controlled by the Cubans, the East Germans, and the Soviets back then. And I saw this dude with an AK-47 in his hand, and he started to run away, and I shot him 3 times in the back from about, I don't know, 300-400 meters, something like that. I was a pretty good shot that night. And eventually I had a look at him, and he was about 13 years old. And I didn't obviously realize that from that distance. And I still sometimes have bad dreams about that dude. Wish I hadn't have shot him. But he was carrying a rifle. If he didn't have a rifle in his hand, I wouldn't have shot him. So,
Hmm.
but shit happens. Basically, is the way I look at it. I didn't know how old he was. I mean, maybe, like I should say, he looked about 13. He might be 15. I don't know. Swapo didn't really care because they were communist kids. And
Hmm.
I've also been into more than one small Southwest African village where everything was killed. Like, not just the men and women, but the men, the women, the children, the babies. They killed the dogs, they killed the cows, they killed the goats, just because they'd helped out the South African forces a little bit somehow.
Ugh.
And I've seen that more than once. So you have I done things I wish I hadn't? Yeah, sure. But I'm a bloke, and I've got to live with it pretty much. On the whole, I think I did more good than bad. But yeah, I don't know, man. I am not a philosopher,
Hmm.
so you know. Um,
Right. Very you know, very interesting stories to think about and everything like that. It's just I it's one thing for people who have like actually been in the combat zones and stuff to talk about these kinds of things, but it's I do caution guys to be extremely, online larpy and asking for these kinds of situations because like, you should be comfortable with violence as a man, but I don't know about being, basking in the glory of it, wanting it to come. Like God knows what would happen if a civil war broke out here in the United States or something. The amount of casualties and the untold amounts of damage that would occur from it. I mean, just like what happened in our first one, it was the war that caused the most casualties in American history. Was fought here on our own shores. And it took us over 20 years to fully build the country back together from all the damage that it caused. And God knows what would happen if it was fought on a scale like today. So I don't know. I'm generally in the camp of just cautioning people that, you know, try and work for peace, man. Like I don't know, when the bullets start flying, who the hell knows what's going to happen?
Civil wars are the most vicious wars always. And in the West, if we end up in wars, like to try and keep our nations, they are going to be civil wars. And
Hmm.
they are going to be really vicious and nasty. And if you don't realize that, then you're foolish.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. So on that note, I think we'll wrap up here. Anything you want to plug and chill?
Oh yeah, for sure. On Saturday evening, 9 o'clock UK time, which I think is 7 a.m. Eastern Australian time, which I think is 2000 Greenwich Mean Time. Please come and watch Splendid Isolation, which I think will be 93 or 94 this week. That's how many shows we've had. And we're now over 1,000 subscribers. So, yeah, come and check that out, guys. It's a pretty good
Awesome.
show.
Awesome. And I'll put a link to your channel in the description of the video when I'm done here. Thanks for coming on, man. This is a fantastic conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Red Hawk, I'm always happy to come on. I think you're a good dude. And I hope to have you on a stream on my channel soon. So, yeah, cool.
Cool. Absolutely. Yeah, we've had some good streams on your channel together, so people should go and check those out. All right. Shillings on my end. I'll do another hunting stream this weekend at some point, and then Man's Hour next week. And I'm also going to try and put out a Substack article this weekend. I got a pretty good idea for one, this week, so I'm going to try and write that out for everyone and get that back out there. So thanks for coming by, guys, and be well, and we'll see you next time.